Hello and welcome to this special Christmas edition of our series From a Distance. It features Philip Lawson, arranger, composer and past member of the Kingsingers. We hope you enjoy our chat. I'd like also to wish everybody out there a Merry Christmas, and here's hoping that 2021 brings us all closer together with more singing and more music making. Keep safe and keep warm. Hi Phil!
Hey Steve! How you doing?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm fine. You look very very healthy.
Thank you.
Compared with my cadaverous face.
I wish I felt very healthy.
Oh,
You look very learned there with certificates and
it's
your past sprawled on a wall. It's very nice.
No, it's all a fake.
Yeah, I recognise some of those guys in that picture behind you.
Oh
as
yes,
well.
that's yes. That's the first photo shoot since you went. Actually, that was Johnny's first photo shoot.
Ah, yeah. No wonder you all look so happy.
Yeah. And look at this one, Steve. Look. Tell me what that is.
Oh gosh, I can't see it from here. Oh.
Shall I put Lots of Your Misery?
Is that a studio?
Yeah.
Is that a studio at what's his name's house?
Actually, no. It's before that. It's Psalm East or one, whichever. Making that pop up. Do you remember with Bruce Johnston?
Spirit Voices.
Spirit Voices.
The guest album.
Yeah. The guest album.
Most expensive album in the whole world ever.
With the fewest guests.
It was great. Actually, I was talking to Johnny a few months back.
Oh yeah.
And he told me that one of his favorite, because I asked him to name some of his favorite KS tracks, thinking that he would talk about the ones he was part of.
Yeah.
And he said one of his favorites was from Spirit Voices.
Oh.
Which was really, really odd.
Remember
that? I can't remember if he said Vienna.
Oh yeah.
Or it might have been Golden Brown. Was it called Golden Brown? Wasn't that your solo?
That was my solo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crammed into Steve Levine's house in Fulham with Bob. I think it's just Bob and me went that day. Yeah. And I think Bob was going to do the solo. That's right. And I think he ran it through once and said, Phil, you do it. So that was only...
Was that Steve Levine's house where there was a kind of a big, thick black curtain and you stood behind the curtain and that was the recording studio?
That's it.
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remembered that. I did the kind of lead vocals with Gabriel Crouch behind that curtain, trying not to giggle.
Lots of things went on behind that curtain. We perhaps didn't talk about.
So Phil, it's really nice to meet up. We've been doing this series of chats, interviews, if you like, and we called it From a Distance. And actually, I think the distance where I am here in the Forest of Dean to where you are on the outskirts of Salisbury is probably the nearest of all the ones.
The nearest we'll get, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. The nearest we get. So it's really nice. We might be able to turn the mics off and just shout.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take you right back to the beginning, pre-Kingsingers. I mean, going back a long time now. We're going back almost kind of 30 years, aren't we?
Half a century.
So tell us a little bit about the Philip Lawson pre-1993.
Wow. Well, what do I say? I mean, I come from a non-musical family. So music in my house was only a couple of, well, not more than a couple, but LPs that my dad owned. In fact, interesting story. When he was evacuated down to Budleigh Salterton in the war from central London, one of the families he was with, they had a tradition of making the London boys get into their pajamas every evening, come down by the fire or whatever, and listen to a piece of classical music. and he had never heard anything like this before. That sparked his interest. And he passed that on to us in terms of taking us to occasional concerts in the Albert Hall. And I was enthralled by the orchestra and stuff and what we heard and everything, but had no choir activity at all until one day the Scouts, this boy called Jimmy White, who not the snooker player, but said, "I've heard about this choir that's nearby, and I'm thinking of joining." And he did join, and he came to me in the playground at school and said, "God, it's such better fun than Scouts. You know, you get to muck around in the gallery and throw hassocks at each other and all this, you know." Which we didn't do much of, but anyway. And so I did an interview there, and you know, they let me in, and it literally changed my life, because you know, having not encountered church music at all, I was now not exactly steeped in it. I mean, I'm obviously not a cathedral. It was a little beautiful little Saxon parish church on the outskirts of Crawley, just outside Gatwick Airport. And it was a boys' choir, and we did services every Sunday, two services, you know, those were the days. And it was absolutely marvelous, and it kind of all went from there, really. That the guy in charge had been at Magdalen, Oxford, and he said, "Oh, you should go for a choral scholarship." And I did actually go to Magdalen for an interview, and Bernard Rose, who was the organist at the time, he said, "Well, it's very nice, but I can't give you a choral scholarship because you're still in trouble." I was singing music for a while, you know, with top E flats and stuff. And at the age of 16.
Wow.
No, 17 actually. Yes, I suppose it would
be.
Yeah. I mean, my voice just didn't break. So actually, I went to York. Was the only place that would have me. As I was, you know, the voice was not in great shape. My countertenor voice, so I went to York, and I did 2 years as a countertenor choral scholar in the Minster Choir under Francis Jackson. And then I won't tell there's a long story of how I changed, but in my last year I changed to bass. And suddenly all the vocal problems that I'd had as an alto, which none of my teachers had been able to get to the bottom of, just disappeared. And it seemed the most natural thing in the world.
Wow. And I mean, we used to have great times on tour. If there was ever a down moment, Phil Lawson singing a little bit of countertenor was always going to make us laugh.
Guaranteed.
No, don't take it personally. But you did. That was a great check. That was a great move, though, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was. Yeah, it's one that lots of other people have done. You know, Jeremy Wyatt, Julian Clarkson. A lot of people do that. But yes, it was. And I went straight to London from York and auditioned for BBC Singers, St Paul's, Westminster Abbey, all the usual stuff, you know. And actually, in those days, it didn't seem to be that many of us around, you know. I mean, these days, there's hundreds of singers all competing for the places, you know. The phone seemed to go quite often for jobs with... Oh,
I see. Singers around rather than countertenors who would change the baritones.
No, real baritones, you know. Yeah. So, but what I didn't particularly enjoy was the thing of, you know, waiting for the phone to ring. My dad worked for the same company all his life, and you know, brought me up that you go to work at 9. I mean, he wasn't telling me to do that, but I had that kind of mentality, and it was unsettling. For, you know, some days you had nothing, and then you've got to go down to Southwark, and then you've got a late night rehearsal somewhere, and then you're back on the tube to Walthamstow, and you know what I mean. It didn't feel right. And one day I was walking to the BBC with a guy called Chris Knowles, another baritone, saying to him, "I'm thinking of getting out of London. I'm not that happy here." And he said, "Oh, why don't you go for my job at Salisbury in the cathedral choir there?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean? You've been here for a year?" And he said, "Yeah, but they haven't found anybody." So within 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know when it was, but I went down on the train, auditioned, and it just felt right. You know, it was going to be daily singing. And I know that's something that you, Steve, you craved, didn't you? I mean, when you often talked about that when in the group, you know, you had this wonderful sort of operatic start to your career, and you were going to be a huge, well, I say you were going to be a big star, and then you joined the Kingdom. But you know, it was a wonderful thing living in the close and singing Evensong, and And I know you're going to go on and talk about the writing, but if I just sort of do that as part of this, because I did composition at university, but didn't really do much. This is in the early mid 70s. Music was very kind of avant-garde. There was actually one guy in my year who wrote a concerto for double bed. And that got performed. This is the sort of wacky stuff, and I couldn't relate to that at all. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't really write at all in my 20s. I kind of knew what to do, but didn't think anybody wanted it.
Yeah.
And it was only when I got a job as a director of music at a school down there that the choir. I had 2 choirs to run, and the library was incredibly small, so I thought, I'll write them some stuff, and that's where that started really. And plus the fact there were a couple of shows that the lay clerks at the cathedral did as part of the Southern Cathedrals Festival, and Richard Shepherd, the wonderful composer, and he's an alto lay clerk, had been writing the music before. He left 3 years after I joined and went to be headmaster up at York, and I took over writing the music for those, and that was both great fun and good kind of what's the word, apprenticeship for me in just writing for instruments and that sort of thing.
So you were in Salisbury, happy as Larry, and then 1993 comes along. Tell us about 1993.
Well, when I actually went to Salisbury in '82, one of the choristers in the cathedral in front of me was James Carrington, who was the son of our Simon. And Simon used to come to Evensong to watch Jamie, and he actually used to sing for me occasionally. He was on the dep list, but for obvious reasons he couldn't often make himself free. But I got to know him, and he in 1987, that's right, isn't it, said to me, Tony Holt's leaving. Do you think you might like to go for the job? And this is, of course, when you went for the job at the same time, the bass job. I said yes, I would love to, and I auditioned, and I didn't get it. And it was just most sort of I've it's an awe-inspiring thing actually being there with some of the original members, and it just it kind of freaked me out a little bit.
And that's the job Bruce got, of course.
It's the job Bruce got.
The Reverend Bruce Russell. The
Reverend Bruce, yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, cut a long story short, I thought that's the end of that. Had a day with singing with the King Singers. That was fun. And then when Simon himself retired, he came to me and said, I know your circumstances have changed. That's the first thing he said, because I'd recently married Lizzie. Do you still want the job? And I said, oh, you must be joking. Yes, of course I do. Because I'd married her. No. and so that time it went a little bit better. And
that time you were going for a different part, though.
I was, yes, because of course Simon was second baritone and Tony was first. And I remember my first audition in Richard Baker's house, standing next to you. I don't remember this at the time, but I remember you telling me after I got in the job that the very first entry that I had in the very first piece was a bottom G. And as I kind of tried to get this low G out, you thought to yourself, no.
And how wrong I was.
Oh, well, no, you weren't wrong about the bottom Gs.
And then you did the kind of unthinkable thing, which was move parts, which was quite rather interesting. People don't really know the story of that. It was quite an interesting thing, moving parts in a group where you were second baritone. Suddenly
It was a moment of madness, really. It was a very silly thing to do, but I did volunteer, because we had tried, as you remember, to get somebody to sing that high part when Bruce decided to take holy orders, and there really wasn't anybody. And I was in the pub in Salisbury, in the New Inn, with a girl called Alison. I can't remember her other name, but she had been at Trinity, Cambridge, with Gabriel Crouch, and she also knew Andy Mackay, who was one of my lay clerk friends in the car, and I was just chatting to her. I didn't really know her, and she said, "Oh, how's the auditioning going?" And I said, "Well, we can't find anyone." And she said, "You have heard my friend Gabriel, haven't you?" And we said, "Oh, well, actually, he's the guy who put a note through the door. Do you remember this?
Yes,
yeah,
you did.
he put a note through the door and ran away."
Yeah.
Which the note
I
said,
can't do this. I'm rubbish or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So we basically, well, that's the end of that. But because we didn't, nobody knew him. And so I came back to the group, you remember, and said, well, let's get this guy over.
Yeah.
And he turned up, didn't he? And do you remember the hair everywhere?
Yeah.
Gabriel's hair. And he started singing, and it obviously was a little bit too high for him. And then somebody, I don't know who it was Nigel or something, had the idea, well, what happens if we switch him round, to switch him and Phil round? And I think it was one of those Vasquez pieces we were singing, one of those lovely Spanish pieces, and it just clicked. It seemed to gel. And when he'd gone, we all had a little chat, didn't we? And inside myself, I was saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe this job that I loved." This first baritone job by this guy, Tony Holt, who was my hero in my teenage years. And I used to go around my sitting room with my LPs singing.
Fantastic singer.
What a voice. Yeah. I hero worshipped him, is partly why I was so nervous on that first day. I think here's my chance actually to get into that job. And so I foolishly leapt at the chance, shut my eyes and jumped and had to learn a completely different part, which is actually not as, people say, "Oh, how did you do that?" Well, the thing is, I knew most of the stuff. I knew the words. The hardest thing was things like Chanson d'amour. You remember all that close, really, really close harmony of a part which is sometimes a second or a third away from mine. Just, I sometimes even like 5 or 10 years later would kind of wander onto my old part just because I was.
So in those days, at that time, switching parts, and of course we stood next to each other for a few years. Bob was in the group, and Bob Chuckle was doing so much arranging for the group and done compositions and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit of how you decided, because it's quite a brave thing. Because I've taken one or two arrangements in my former time to the group, and I wasn't an arranger or a composer, so I was kind of I had a lot of I don't know, I had nothing to lose really, but when you plucked up courage.
Yeah, I did. I'd already been doing a few arrangements for a group called Quadlibet that I was. It's a little quartet. We didn't sing very often, and it was mostly serious music, but we did the odd light-hearted number at the end. And I thought, well, why don't I rearrange one of these 4-part pieces for 6 parts and see what the group think, and so I rearranged The Water is Wide, The Water is Wide, that lovely folk song. Took it with great trepidation to the group, and we sang it through. And at the end, there was the usual kind of sort of silence, people going, yes, yeah. And Bob turned to me in front of Bruce and said, "Oh, Phil, nice text." And that was his only comment at the time.
Text being a traditional folk song.
Yes, not even my words, yeah. Lovely follow-up to that.
If people, and that was that the arrangement we ended up doing, the Whaley Whaley?
Yes. It was, and it actually it was quite different because the beginning and the end was the same. But if you remember, in the middle there was that bit where, exactly. I nicked that idea from Andrew Jackman in the what's that piece in my audition.
Oh yes, Come On From the 7th Avenue.
That's another story.
That's another story.
Got to be another story. It was sort of heavily reworked and actually it was a couple of nice moments from Bob. Actually, one was the beginning changes from the tonic to the dominant, but I love the sharpened fourth, the whatever mode that is, and I the D sharp in the tenor part there is that, and Bob sang this, and it goes in with the D natural of the melody, and I'd really liked the way that worked. It was an accident actually, because that do 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 do, was the first. And I thought, how does that work if you take it into the dominant? And it worked, and then it worked and worked and worked. It was purely accidental. And he said to me, I can't get around this D sharp, and we sang it again, and he turned to me and said, yes, I understand, and he understands harmony so well that he realized, I get what you're doing there. And the other one was on the second page. There was a moment where I'd resolved, a 4/3 suspension, typical da da, and he just said to me very quietly, "How about not resolving that? Just leave it hanging."
Yeah.
And that's what we now, sing, and little touches like that. And I think that's the great thing about arranging for a group where you're surrounded by superb musicians. You get so much feedback. I mean, you used to make comments about stuff and everything, and as an arranger, you have to. One of the things you have to be is humble. You have to take this and respect what is being done, because it's being done for the right reasons. And so most of my arrangements are not my own; they're reworked by the group.
One arrangement I know we want to share with people who are watching this is that wonderful arrangement of Noel Nouvelet, which is really very clever.
Noël, 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 Noël Nouvelet, Noël chantons ici, les dévotes gens criant à Dieu merci, chantons Noël, le grand Nouvelet, Noël Nouvelet, Noël chantons ici, Noël, Noël.
Tell us how you approach arrangement. What do you look for?
I mean, the words are the thing that govern it, really. But actually, having said that, that particular arrangement is almost not governed by the words. You know what I mean? It's this ostinato which you'll hear there, and it's a kind of. I wanted to get a sort of medieval feel going, and one of the hocketing, this is a medieval cross rhythms. I thought, if I can get a little bit of that going on, let's add something different, because everybody knows that da 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 in the kind of now the green blade riseth. It's very four square, and that's what went into my mind. I remember we were in Hilversum actually doing doing with Carl Davis, whatever that. I can't remember the names of albums today.
Oh, what was that one? With the big band?
Film music album. I
can't remember. What was that called?
Circle of Life.
That's the one, yeah.
And that was the day that Gabriel said to me, have some of this. And it was cake that they were... do you remember this?
No, but I know what's coming.
Yeah. He said, this is special cake, And am I allowed to say this? I think, isn't it stuff that's kind of got drugs in it or something? I don't understand.
I think this is what the band was eating in the break.
Yeah. But it was a myth. It wasn't like that at all. And I was kind of taken in really? Gosh. Anyway, I remember it distinctly. And I was at the piano sort of somewhere in the studio and fiddling around with this da 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 da,
Yeah.
Trying to make it fit, and it's and eventually I sort of did, and
it's a fantastic. I mean, I used to love singing that piece, but I know choirs love that piece as well. It's really satisfying. It's difficult to learn, but once you've learned it, it's a real tour de force, isn't it?
It is, and there's a beautiful example of what I was talking about earlier with you. With the last boom, 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 just before the main tune comes back, you said to me when we were rehearsing that, Phil, how about just doing one of those booms, one of those bars? Before?
Oh yes,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's called dramatic recapitulation is the correct term, but it was a masterstroke because that. that the thing comes back earlier, slightly earlier than you think, and there we are.
Yeah. It's creative times, lots of creative times there.
Yeah.
So from kind of humble KS arranging beginnings and the knocks that one takes, Bob leaves the group. You become basically the KS arranger for years and years and years. By
default, yes.
Yeah, by default. But a lot of output going on in lots of stuff. And I was just thinking back to Simple Gifts, the album that won us a Grammy, and how many of your arrangements are on the album. It's almost all of yours, isn't it?
It's 10 out of 15. I think it's 2/3 of them. Yeah, but I mean, nobody else would do it. So
Yeah.
No, we all had a lot of fun, I think, with that album, and particularly where we did it. At Francis Ross's house. Some people don't know Status Quo. You either don't know them or you go, wow, Status Quo, the huge 1970s rock band still going. And
they're probably most famous for their Christmas #1, aren't they? Isn't that their big Status Quo moment?
They had a Christmas song. I'm not sure it went to #1 actually. I think Endless Sweet Caroline and Rocking All Over the World. And the great man was there. Do you remember?
Yeah,
he was there. And I love that moment when we were, because he was making don't know if you remember, he was making a DVD or something about the Beatles or something, and they wanted him to play on it, and he said, well, I'm not a lead guitarist, am I? We're a band with 2 rhythm guitars, me and Parfit, we're both. So he had to learn lead guitar for this.
Yeah.
And so he kept on coming to the studio, didn't he? Every morning. And, which one shall I use today? Remember the studio was completely covered with wall-to-wall guitars.
It was quite an awesome experience recording there in his house, over his garage.
Over his garage, yes. And we were crammed into the drum room, weren't we, for a lot of it.
He was trying to sell the house while we were there as well.
Yes,
remember that? We used to arrive at these fantastic. We used to call them the Pearly Gates. Do you remember? Because it was in Pearly.
Yes, the Pearly Gates.
And they had these huge gates, and you drove up, and they went. When you drove in for your day's work. Yeah, quite an interesting moment. And what was special about that, and I don't know if it's the only time, it was certainly the only time in my time with the group, except for one time when we recorded the original track of MLK, where the 6 of us went into Siamese studio for a day with a sound technician and Greg Jackman, the same sound technician, who did and we put together MLK. And that was a kind of a new way of doing a cappella at the time.
Yeah,
it was kind of meant to be new, and it moved. The sound moved around. Of course, a cappella went.
Didn't you have Jeremy on? Doesn't it say on the?
I think Jeremy was in there. Yeah, in that first one, and so we did that in. It was just before Jeremy left, I think.
So he gets
and that was a calling card. We took that along to EMI, and we said. We want to make an album, and it'll sound like this, but it's going to cost a lot of money.
And those were the days.
But they had to be, you had to take your projects to EMI and convince them that was. But no, they said, let's do it. And then we got to, they suggested a producer, but we had Greg working on it. Yeah. But in those days, Good Vibrations, I think, was quite groundbreaking. I remember being kind of really proud when it came out.
I think,
it's quite old-fashioned now.
No, but I think the track itself, Good Vibrations, is amazing. When I first heard that, I hadn't heard it before I was auditioning, but it was one of the ones, obviously, it was around, and several of the tracks were from it. And so I got the holder copy, and oh my god, it was brilliant. When Bob starts and you're doing your dum, 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 it's really, really classy, actually.
We recorded onto tape, because in those days you recorded onto tape.
Yeah.
And we used 2 16 or 3 16-track tape machines, and recording it and mixing it down and booting it onto another. But it was on tape. Who records on tape these days? I mean, I don't know.
No.
Do they?
No, I don't think so. That's amazing. Yeah.
And I remember the guys when we were doing editing and stuff. They had razor blades. And they would join bits of tape together. And
in 1992,
I'm sure they did. Yeah, because they were little razor blades in the thing.
I thought that went out with the Beatles.
Well,
God.
soon after that, we started having DAT. Now somebody's going to write in and say, "What are you talking about, Steve? That's a load of rubbish. We were recording digitally." But my memory of it is we had tapes whirring. Hold on, got to go. The rest of it's on another tape.
Yeah, you're doing it
a
wrong.
Huge thing out. We're like waiting to play the rest of the track because it was recording on.
Yeah.
But
do you remember?
gosh, I really feel old now.
Oh, I know. It's awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you remember the Trogs? Do you remember how we came across that wonderful tape?
Yes.
That was doing what's it? Oh God, come on! What's the name of it? Where Greg kept on, piping these things through.
Oh, that's why I was saying the story about MLK is because that album, The Simple Gifts, was a kind of an us thing. We didn't have your producer, did we?
Ah, no.
We did what the Trogs did.
Yeah,
which was
we're supposed
to do it. Do it yourself. I think Greg had the ultimate patience. He was quite patient, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Really.
People listening to this are going to think, what on earth are they talking about? Does one of us want to just say what it is?
Yeah, no, you do it. Yeah.
We kept having these moments of, effing and blinding coming through the talkback in the studio. And we eventually said to Greg, what on earth is that? And he said, come and have a listen. And it was something which was kind of obscure at the time. It's now widely available on the internet.
You can find it online very easily.
And it's the Trogs, the old Andover-based Trogs from the 70s, making an album with them, no producer. The producer hadn't turned up. And the engineer decided to leave the tape rolling as they try and cobble this together and throw insults at each other. You're doing it wrong. Dabba, dabba, dabba. So everybody who listens needs to go and look. It's hilarious.
And the drummer who storms out.
Yeah.
Slams the door.
Right, that's it. I'm out. Yeah. Anyway, so that's. And we dined out a lot on that, didn't we? We used to. I love the way we used to use things from that and other things as well in our daily life. I mean, Georgia, my youngest, when our kids used to turn up, didn't they, occasionally? And when she was about 7, she had this way of, hey, if she didn't like something, she'd start a sentence with, hey, Daddy, that's all right. And we used to go around, didn't we? Go, hey, and copying them. It was beautiful.
Hey, just thinking of Christmas. Christmas was quite a special time. Chaos years, because you've been usually working quite hard and you were looking forward to getting home. A lot of us had kids, so the people, the agents around the world, tried to make us work as late as possible. You remember?
Yeah.
Will you do a concert on an island on the Christmas Eve for Pavarotti?
Yeah.
We'll do it for £1 million. No.
Yeah.
Do you remember all those kind of things?
I remember that.
People saying, will you extend a tour so we can, home life was very sacred, wasn't it? And
it was.
And it's always been one of those things. I think for every touring musician is, you try to protect, the parameters. You've got to give it. And in a group like the Kingsingers, thank goodness, there's always people who are wanting to do as much as they can and to push the boundaries and keep creating, and not get too stale and too overprotective about themselves. So it's a good balance. But Christmas was a special time, and I was just trying to think of favourite times. Memories, Christmas memories where we did concerts, and have you got any that
that sort of stick out for you?
Yeah, I think. Well, actually, I mean, a funny to start with maybe was Toronto. I think it was Nigel's last concert. It was his last concert actually, Nigel Short, and I have never been so cold in my life as we were in Toronto. That minus 20 or something.
Yeah.
And I remember going over the road to the there was an Indian restaurant opposite the hotel, and they had a buffet. $150 Canadian, all you can eat, and it was exactly what I needed. You used to go to these places, didn't you? And
yeah.
And at the end of it, I thought, this is great. I'm going to go and say thanks to the guy. So I went up and I said, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. And I was chatting like you do, and I said, oh yeah, wonderful. Where are you from? And he said, I'm from Wembley. It was just a brilliant moment. Come all that way, and he's from Wembley. Anyway,
where was the concert? I can't remember the concert.
Roy Thompson.
Oh yes.
And I think we were late. I think the plane had not taken off or something, so we turned up and I did Wind in the Willows on no rehearsal or something. And
did we turn? Oh gosh, I remember that. That was stressful.
Nigel's last concert. Yeah.
It's bad enough turning up and going straight on stage for an a cappella concert without ever having sung on the stage, which we've done a few times.
Yeah.
But gosh.
Actually, I correct myself. I don't think it was his last concert. It was the last orchestral one. But we went to Austin, Texas after that, and where I think George W. Bush is from there, isn't he, or something? Anyway, that's by the by. And
yes,
and that was the incident where we came back from going out with Nigel for his.
Oh yes, and Gabriel Crouch and myself nearly got arrested.
You were inside the nativity scene in the hotel.
We were inside. We decided it would be really funny. I'm going to tell everybody now because it's.
And while you do, Steve, my power is just about to go, so I'm going to go and turn up.
Okay. So I'm not
from the 21st century, so that.
So confession time. Gabriel Crouch and myself, we come back from a riotous night out. It was a free evening, and we came back and we thought it would be a good idea because in this hotel, these big sort of style hotels, huge lobby, they had a massive gingerbread house behind a picket fence with humongous flowers made of cookie and sugar and all sorts of things. So I think it was my idea that we should get inside. We should try and get inside the house because it was the size of an English garden shed. It was massive. We got into it. So we were sitting there because we were giggling away and laughing, and somebody on the reception down the hall had obviously heard us or seen us getting inside this thing, and they called security, who came along with his gun. It's Texas, it's America, and all we heard was this really macho voice saying, "Sir, step away from the nativity scene." And because it was such an inappropriate use of the words nativity scene, it was nothing to do with the nativity. It was a gingerbread house. We burst out laughing as we were crouched inside this thing, and he repeated it. But
that was lovely.
It was quite funny. But
I think. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just thinking back to the time we went to record. Well, it was kind of a TV show, but it was done over four nights. We sang in the Moment Tabernacle Choir, and we shared a little clip of the 12 Days of Christmas. You remember that thing with all the bells and
dancers and everything?
I think we sang to over 100,000 people.
Yeah, that's right.
On was it five nights? Or
4 or 5 nights, yeah.
That was quite an awesome experience of Christmas.
It's a very heavily charged atmosphere, isn't it, in there? And you kind of get swept in. Funnily enough, the other day I saw, just happened to come across the snatch of the one that Hugh Bonneville did. And it's absolutely beautiful. He did a sort of 15-minute kind of monologue based on a family who lost their 4 children, I think, in the 19th century in a crossing of the Atlantic, and went on to found a charity. I'm embarrassed that I can't remember the name of it, but it's still going, I think. And it's a story of incredible kind of resilience in the face of tragedy. And he tells the story with Mac Wilberg's beautiful orchestration with his orchestra. Oh my God!
What a genius!
What a genius! What a genius! And what a humble guy as well. And actors as well come on and act this out. And I was absolutely, in tears at the end of it. And I was not even there, and I could tell that he was really, you should check it out. Actually, it's beautiful. And it reminded me of that kind of atmosphere that we got swept up in.
Phil, if you had to choose one of your arrangements to take to a desert island, what would it be?
What a question.
Okay, you can take 3. Seeing as it's Christmas, you can take 3.
3 arrangements.
Yeah, 3 of your arrangements.
I think Noel Nouvelet would probably be one of them, actually, because it was one of those which took a little bit of working out, and I kind of got there in the end. And maybe Veni Veni Emmanuel as well as another one. But maybe, I don't know, for a non-Christmas one, something, well, possibly, I don't know, either The Water is Wide or Turtle Dove, one of those very early folk song ones, I guess, but I had such great fun arranging for the group, because it's luxury, isn't it? I remember you saying to me, when singing with the group was like having driven a Morris Minor and suddenly you go for a ride in a Rolls Royce. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And arranging similarly, you suddenly turn up with this piece, and it's perfect, note perfect, in tune, and then it gets performed all over the place. So it's very.
Well, you're incredibly prolific. You just have to put your name into, YouTube or Google, and it just comes up with more than you can ever feast. Are you still enjoying writing?
More than ever, actually, yes. More than ever, because I get more time to do it now. I mean, obviously I'm not retired or anything, but I'm not on tour, and it was always difficult kind of sitting on planes and hotel rooms for the odd 10 minutes trying to get something done, and now I can actually sit down and do it properly, and it's I just love it. That's why there's so much out there. It's because it's what I love, and you just got to do what you love, haven't you? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Phil, I wish you a happy Christmas,
and you too,
and all the folks there. The kids have all grown up.
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
We're very old these days.
But they still can't stop them coming back for Christmas, though.
Exactly. You were ever the Peter Pan character. Nobody ever knew your true age, but I can now officially tell everybody that Philip Lawson is 105.
Yes. Not yet. I'm 104. 105 next week.
Have a great Christmas.
Thank you, Steve.
We'll be enjoying listening to your music, through this from a distance. Special Christmas episode. That's great. And I'll be seeing you later this year, but maybe we'll meet up and chat about that another time.
Let's do that. It's a pleasure, Steve. Thank you very much.
See you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.